I'm making sunshine for the journey. I'm making sunshine for the journey. I'm making sunshine for the journey. And I am making it right now.
Hey, everybody. Today we have another Sunshine for the Journey episode just for parents of young kids. I'm excited because we have our first dad on the show. Chris is going to share some insight about what went right when his kids were young and how the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA law, has impacted his life. This year is the 35th anniversary of the law. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Miss Katie.
Can you tell us about some of the things that you and your kids loved doing together when they were young?
Yeah, we had great times. We loved playing in the front driveway, and that's one distinguishing feature of our house is we have a long front driveway. And there was a border with big stones, and my son loved to peek under every stone and see if there were bugs, and he'd always show what he found to me. We also loved going on walks in our neighborhood with our dog. We went on trips together pretty often, so we had family in Illinois and down in Texas, and we'd go see them, and we'd make the trips a big adventure. And then also we read a lot. A lot of times, right before bed, we'd pull out a book and read. And one of the books we liked to read a lot was called The Happy Hollisters. And that was a series of books about a family with 6 children. And the 6 children had a lot of free time, and they would go on long adventures around town. And we used to laugh a little bit because they were so independent that they would get into some mischievous pickles sometimes.
And how did you make the stories even more funny?
Sometimes I'd make up adventures.
So can you think of something more routine that you feel made a positive difference over the years?
There was a lot of consistency in our household growing up. So we regularly had family dinners together at a dining table, and we would always make our kids put their screens away. And so there was that time where we'd be together and we'd be talking and reflecting on our day and thinking about things that had happened and things that we were planning for in the future. We also played a lot of games together. So we had card games and board games and things like that. And then mostly we were consistent on time together. So my work schedule, although I had pretty long hours at work, I'd be home in the evening and we'd spend time together then. And so I'd put the kids to bed pretty often and be there when they woke up in the morning.
Well, that sounds pretty fabulous. So what did you enjoy doing when you were a kid?
I lived in some fun places when I was growing up. So the first 2 places I remember where I lived were in England. And in the far east part of England is where we lived first. And that neighborhood was near a forest and a meadow. And I got to go walk around the neighborhood with my friends and my parents and explore things. Another thing that I got to do, and this was at the second place where we lived in England, was ride bike down to the river. So we lived in a little town that was right on the biggest river in England, which is called the River Thames. And there were always ducks and swans on the river. And we would take our breadcrumbs and our bread crusts and take them down to the river and feed them. And I can vividly remember that a large throng of swans and ducks would always gather around us as we fed them. Another thing I enjoyed doing when I was growing up is play basketball. In my backyard in Norman, we had a basketball goal. And what's interesting is that my father built it himself. He sketched out the design for a basketball goal and then cut the wood for the backboard of the goal. And then he got up on a big ladder and mounted it on a pole and screwed in the rim to the backboard. And so we'd play on this basketball goal all the time. And I'd have my friends over, and sometimes I'd just play alone anytime I wanted outdoor time. And then maybe one other thing I used to enjoy doing when I was a kid was I collected things. I mostly enjoyed collecting baseball cards, which what's funny is I didn't even watch baseball at the time I was collecting the cards. I eventually did start enjoying watching baseball games, but for a long time, I'd just collect the cards, and I liked looking at the players, and I liked reading the back of the card where it talked about all their statistics, and then I liked organizing my cards. So I would often organize them alphabetically by the players' names, or I would organize them by the team names, or I'd organize them by the year that the card was created.
So like you'd organize them one way and then just shuffle it all up and do a different way?
Yes.
That
I'd
sounds
try
like
and
fun.
figure out what seemed like the best way to organize them. Eventually, I arrived on a consistent method, but I just liked organizing.
Sure. Well, is there something you remember doing with your parents that really stands out?
Well, I can remember several things that I did with my parents. One was my father loved music, and my mom did too, but my father had a big stereo with big stereo speakers, and he also had what were called reel-to-reel players, and these were circular players, kind of like a cassette tape, but 20 times larger, and they would fit onto this machine, and the tape would unspool from one end and go to the other, and as it would go to the other end, it would play music. And my dad would rig them up so they'd play 6 hours of music at one time. And I would sit there and listen to the music, and sometimes I'd put headphones on and read a book while I was listening to the music. So it was kind of a magical time. We also went on picnics together pretty often. We'd find a place that sounded fun to go to and put a picnic basket together and go. And then one other thing we liked to do was play card games and board games. And we'd do it as a family, and we'd choose the games together, although there'd always be kind of a consistent few games that we would play. And then we also went on trips together. So we got to go skiing together, and that's both water skiing and snow skiing.
Well, that sounds like fun. So how about your grandparents?
Well, my grandparents were a lot of fun. When we lived in Oklahoma, I had grandparents nearby, which when we lived in England, I couldn't see my grandparents very often. But once we moved here, I could see my grandparents, and we'd go to my grandma and grandpa's house and have cookouts. They had a beautiful back deck that was made of wood by my cousin, and we'd sit out on the back deck in some nice, relaxing outdoor couches and chairs. And then my grandparents would set up a croquet field out on their lawn, and we'd play croquet together, or we'd just play by throwing balls around. And my grandpa Ed loved to cook for us, and so he'd make hamburgers or barbecue, and one big treat he liked to make was ice cream from scratch. And so we'd watch him make the ice cream, and then 30 minutes or an hour later, we'd get to eat it.
Did you have a favorite flavor?
I liked everything.
Well, this month is the 35th anniversary of the ADA law. Can you tell us how you think the law has made an impact on your life?
What's interesting is 35 years ago was right about the time I started to need to use a scooter to get around. I couldn't walk well enough to get everywhere I needed to go, so my mom and I bought a scooter so I could get around. And what I noticed right away, which I hadn't figured out before, was it was hard to get around if you had to rely on wheels. And so even getting up on sidewalks and things like that, or getting into buildings, could sometimes be difficult because there wouldn't be a curb cut or there would be stairs in my way. And so one thing that happened once the ADA law came into effect was that people had to build ramps so that I could get into buildings and to get up on sidewalks. So it just made everything a lot more accessible. And so I could get into places where I might want to work or buy things or see things.
Has the ADA law made a difference for you as a parent or for your family?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one thing that was really important about the ADA law was it created more visibility for people with disabilities. If you couldn't go anywhere, if you couldn't get up ramps or get upstairs, it would prevent you from going places where you might want to go. And because of that law came into effect, and there were ramps in places where I needed to go, I could go those places. I could go with my family to see events. I could walk down the sidewalk with my family and go places. So it made a big difference in that way. But also, it helped people find jobs. So it's really important sometimes as a parent to have a job. And so I could go places, apply for jobs. It was easier to get around an office building and things like that.
That is really important. Well, can you tell us any stories involving accessibility from your travels?
Sure. So, like I mentioned a minute ago, we've had a lot of fun as a family on going on trips. And our first one was a little bit of a misadventure because we were worried ahead of time that the way we would refer to things being accessible for me to get around in my scooter would be different from the way the places we were going understood. And that happened on our first trip. We went to Mexico and we called a hotel and we asked them, "Is your hotel accessible?" And they told us, "Of course it is. You can get around in our hotel." But once we got there, we figured out that our room in the hotel had a doorway that was much too narrow for me to get through. So it made it difficult to get in and out of the room. But we had good times as well. One thing we found when we went to Europe was that they had laws that were probably even better than the United States on making facilities accessible. And so on our first trip to England, we went to London and stayed in a hotel near Trafalgar Square and Big Ben and all those fun sites that are there. And we stayed in a hotel room that had every kind of accessibility feature you could imagine. And what was funny was they had a button in the bathroom and in the bedroom that you could press to get help if you needed it with any accessibility issues. And guess who used the button first? It wasn't me. It was my daughter. The front desk at that hotel got to know us really well within the first hour because my daughter tried every button in the room. And the front desk people kept coming up and saying, "Is everything okay?" And my daughter would kind of smile and say, "Sorry." Another fun thing we did on that first trip to London was we got out the very first night and shopped a little bit. Our hotel was right down the street from Trafalgar Square. And along the way, we found lots and lots of tourist shops with cheap little items for sale. And we got to one, and my son gravitated toward a whoopee cushion. And that's a little airbag that's made of thick rubber that you can fill up and then slowly let the air out, and it'll make the sounds of a toot. And my son thought that was the funniest thing ever. And so he would hop onto my scooter. He was a really little guy then. He was 5 years old. And he'd get between my legs and we'd ride all over town. And he would sneak his little toot bag out of his pocket, fill it up with air, and then let off sounds as we went by other tourists and Londoners. And one really fun moment was we were standing on a street corner waiting for the light to change for us to cross. And there were two young businessmen in business suits waiting at that corner with us. And they were having a conversation about their work. And my son snuck his little bag out and made a long, loud toot. And the two men looked at each other, and then they looked over at Evan, my son, because they'd figured out that he'd made that noise. And one man said to the other, "That little boy has got a fart machine in his hands."
That's a great story.
But also what was fun was we found that a lot of the sites were accessible to us. And in England and in France, they always let me go to the front of the line. The people would see us in a scooter in our group, and they'd invite us to go to the front of the line, and then they'd make it easier for us to get into whatever site we wanted to see. So my kids probably remember going to see the Eiffel Tower best because we didn't plan ahead, and we got there on a beautiful Saturday morning, and there was a 3-hour line. But as soon as one of the workers from the Eiffel Tower saw me, he came over and said, "I can take you to the front of the line." And we went to the very front of the line, and we got tickets, and they helped take us to the line to go up the elevator to see the top of the Eiffel Tower. And 15 minutes later, we were at the top. It was a blast.
Well, do you have any advice for parents with young kids?
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of advice. How much time do you have? Actually, I'd say one thing that was fun being with my kids was just being around. We didn't have to plan for things that were fun together. It was just nice to be around the house. And so it was nice to have breakfast in the morning together. It's also nice to come home from work and they would be there. And we'd usually just spend time together and just let things flow as they did. And some of those things I talked about, those things that we enjoyed doing together, were easy things to do around the house. Just eating dinner, making dinner, playing games. That was good times.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, sure. I just encourage any parent to not be too hard on yourself. There are things that go well and there are things that don't. I remember when I first became a parent, I thought to myself, I'll never lose my temper. I'd never show my temper to my kids, but I couldn't help it. No matter what, you lose patience sometimes. And so I remember a couple of times getting impatient and just kind of shouting to myself, oh no. And it's okay. Your kids will get used to it too. I'd say one other good idea is to use the resources you have. I can think back to when we would start to lose our patience, and it was so nice when we lived in the same town as my mom, and she was always glad to watch the kids. So just remembering that you have family or friends, or maybe you have a favorite babysitter who you can call on short notice and say, hey, I need help. I need to get out for a little while without my kids with me. And that was nice. Time apart's good. Time together is good, but some of both is great.
Well, what great advice. Thanks for joining me today on the Ready, Set, Go show.
Thanks for having me, Miss Katie.
And thanks to all the parents who are listening. I hope you feel inspired to make some sunshine for your family's journey today. Know you are doing very important work when you give your kids a hug, make healthy meals, play, or read books together. You are making the world a better place every time you choose to bond with your kids and give them a sense of safety and love. Shine on, friends.
I'm making sunshine for the journey. I'm making sunshine for the journey. I'm making sunshine for the journey. And I am making it right now. And then I watch the news and think, well, where do I even begin? And then I think again, if not me, who? And if not now, when? If not me, who? And if not now, when? So I'm gonna put one foot in front of the other, 1 foot. I'm gonna put 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot. I'm gonna put 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot. Yes, and I'll be on my way. Yes, I'll be on my way.
How you gonna make sunshine?
I'm going to open my mind.
Open my mind.
Do what makes me smile inside. Then I'll share my smile with you. And like a wave, it will reach others too. I'm gonna put 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot. I'm gonna put 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot. I'm gonna put 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot. Yes, and I'll be on my way. Yes, I'll be on my way. And I'm making sunshine for the journey. I'm making sunshine for the journey. I'm making sunshine for the journey. And I am making it right now. Say that again. Yes, I am making it right now. One more time. Yes, I am making it right now.
Sunshine.
The Ready, Set, Go show is part of the Possibilities podcast platform.